Tonight on CBC Vancouver News. The shocking video, a cop car hitting a pedestrian. The footage that's leaving many questions also.
It worries me a lot, and it worries women that we speak to a lot.
More attacks, kidnappings, and forced druggings, who police are warning in Vancouver. Plus, as the Canadian dollar pushes lower, the concern from some businesses relying on U.S. imports and what it could mean for you.
This is CBC Vancouver News.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. I'm Anita Bathe. We begin tonight with some startling video. A man being hit by a Vancouver police cruiser while walking in the middle of the street. The pedestrian is now in hospital with serious injuries, but with the entire thing caught on camera, there are some major questions tonight. CBC reporter Liam Britton has been digging into tonight's top story and joins us live. Liam, what do we know about the crash so far?
Well, Anita, at this point, it's the tape telling us most of the story. This footage has been circulating on social media. It seems to show East Hastings, just west of Main Street, at around 3:20 a.m. Tuesday. Here's what leads to the man being hit. If you look on the right of your screen, you're going to see the man almost stationary. The police car enters from the left side. Then the collision. The cruiser comes to a stop. Now, BC's police watchdog, the Independent Investigations Office, is looking into the crash. The IIO says the man was taken to hospital with serious injuries yesterday. They told us today he is alive. Now, the VPD, for their part, sent us a statement deferring to the IIO. We trust this investigation will shed light on what factors led to the collision, including the reason why the pedestrian was standing motionless in the middle of the road, why the officers did not see the person, the speed of the police vehicle, and other contributing factors.
Okay, Liam, obviously pretty shocking for anyone of us watching the video, but especially for people living in the community. How are they reacting tonight?
Well, the downtown east side has long been dangerous for pedestrians. But the fact that this collision involved a police car is troubling to at least one community advocate. Dave Ham is with the Vancouver Area Network of Drug Users.
Yeah, they're supposed to be the ones protecting us down here, and they're supposed to be alert and aware. They're doing the job in the public, you know, in the community here. So, granted, the gentleman was dressed in darker clothing. He was not moving. He'd been standing kind of stationary for a bit. So I'm not trying to give him an out, but at the same, you know, because at the same time, they've got to be aware.
Now, Ham believes the police car was going too fast. The speed limit there is 30 kilometers. He says there needs to be better enforcement of traffic rules, especially with so many police already in the neighborhood. The IIO is asking for anyone who saw anything or anyone with dash cam or security camera footage of the collision to speak with investigators. Anita?
Liam Britton reporting live tonight, and I should point out that we aren't actually showing the full video. We're just showing up until the point of impact. Thank you, Liam. Well, staying on the downtown east side now, from sexual assaults to druggings and forced confinements, women in the neighborhood say attacks are becoming more frequent and more brutal. As Michelle Gussoub reports, community advocates are now warning about serial predators.
We're now seeing the worst we've ever seen in the downtown east side. It's heartbreaking.
Mabrat Bayane speaks with women on Vancouver's downtown east side every day. They tell her the level of violence they face is escalating, with sex workers warning of more sexual assaults, beatings, forced confinements, and druggings.
We're absolutely seeing an escalation in the kinds of violence and predatory behavior that sex workers are seeing on a day-to-day basis and a night-to-night basis. And many sex workers are telling us that it's among the worst that they've seen in quite a while. And that's saying a lot for a neighborhood like the downtown east side that has suffered a predatory serial murderer who operated almost with impunity in this neighborhood.
The increase in violence is borne out in police data. There were 10 reported forcible confinements involving women during the first 8 months of 2022, compared to 5 for the same time last year. And over that same period, 49 reports of sexual assault against women, compared to 34 in 2021. Advocates say police data offers only a glimpse of the problem, as many choose not to report the results.
It worries me. It worries me a lot, and it worries women that we speak to.
Angela Marie McDougall with Battered Women's Support Services says the deaths of 4 young Indigenous women with connections to the neighborhood have the community on edge. The cases are not considered linked, but fuel fears of men targeting vulnerable women.
We have serial predators that are already here that are doing serial predation in terms of sexualized violence and drug-facilitated rape and all kinds of exploitation.
Advocates say conditions in the neighborhood have deteriorated since the pandemic. Many social supports have disappeared. The opioid crisis is worsening and affordable housing only further out of reach.
This is a series of systemic failures, that this is a series of our collective failures to address poverty in a real and substantial way, to address housing in a real and substantial way.
As conditions worsen, women continue to bear the brunt of the violence. Michelle Gassoub, CBC News, Vancouver.
And a new report into the rise of violent crimes across BC finds the province needs to do more to support the mental health of repeat offenders. Earlier this year, 13 mayors called on the BC government to address the spike in crime rates. And as Leanne Young reports, it seems their call may finally be answered.
This is really good news.
Months after pushing the province to crack down on serial offenders, some of BC's mayors finally heard what they wanted.
Our residents don't care whose jurisdiction it is, they just want to see action. And that's why today is so important, is because collaboratively we now have a path forward.
In a report commissioned by the province, 2 experts, a former police chief and a mental health researcher, spent 4 months on a rapid investigation. Despite a drop in overall crime rates, their findings validate what many in the community have noticed.
Virtually everyone we interviewed, street nurses, mental health workers, staff at the downtown community courts, mayors, police officers, described what's quite obvious, which is the increasing intensity of disorder and aggressive behavior in downtown areas across BC.
Doug Lepard and Amanda Butler made 28 recommendations. The government is immediately adopting 3.
A return of the prolific offenders management pilots that were cut by the previous government, a dedicated provincial committee structure to coordinate service planning for people with complex health needs who come into conflict with the law, and the BC First Nations Justice Council's proposed pilot program based at the Prince George Indigenous Justice Centre to address recidivism amongst First Nations people.
The remaining recommendations call for community-based supports for those struggling with mental health and substance abuse, like nurses, peer-led response teams, with less reliance on police and emergency rooms, while beefing up the level of care as people leave prison, something those who have been through the system say is much needed.
When you're finished a prison sentence, you're dropped off at a bus stop with a welfare check. How is that really supporting me? I'm homeless, have absolutely nothing. Obviously, I'm going to go back to what I know.
The BC government says they're considering all the recommendations. The full report is set to come out later this fall. Leanne Young, CBC News, Vancouver.
Vancouver police are looking for any video from a riot that happened on Sunday. Vancouver police have launched a website and a dedicated tip line to ID suspects who sparked violence and damaged property at the Breakout Festival. The unrest happened after the last-minute cancellation of a Lil Baby concert Sunday night at the Peony Amphitheatre. Hundreds of enraged concert goers caused havoc in and around the venue, damaging food kiosks, overturning tables, tents, and fridges. With reports of looting and fights breaking out in the neighborhood, 7 people were arrested and taken to jail. Well, the historic O'Keefe Ranch near Vernon has declared an outbreak of avian flu. The sudden death of a number of birds prompted an investigation. The ranch's remaining birds have been quarantined to their pens. Authorities are culling infected animals and working on decontamination. A section of the ranch will remain quarantined for several weeks or longer. The ranch is open to the public. Well, almost 2 years after a massive, deadly surge of water roared out of the Cleveland Dam, 2 people are now suing Metro Vancouver. In October of 2020, a huge volume of water was released from the North Shore Dam into the Capilano River. An early report blamed human error when a drum gate was opened. The rushing water killed 1 man, while another was reported missing and presumed to have died. Now, a couple is suing Metro Vancouver for damages. The couple claims they were sitting on a rock in the river when the water rushed toward them. They allege they each suffered pain, fatigue, and loss of income. None of their claims have been proven in court. 3 Metro Vancouver workers were eventually fired in connection with the incident, and an alarm system was later installed at the dam. Well, a bit of shock and perhaps frustration today if you passed by a gas station or, even worse, actually had to fill up. Gas prices in Metro Vancouver have spiked about 10 cents, once again passing the $2 a litre mark. One analyst says this jump is because of planned maintenance at refineries south of the border and because there's still high demand for gasoline as we head into the fall. Prices are expected to drop in the coming weeks. And new data from Stats Canada shows from coast to coast, fewer Canadians are owning their own home, with BC being seen as with some of the sharpest declines. Over the last decade, the number of people renting in this country has grown twice as fast as the number of people who own. Households that rent grew by 21%, while those that own grew by just 8%. Owners still outnumber renters, but overall, Canadians were less likely to own their own home than they were in 2011. The data also shows that BC is the most unaffordable province for housing in the country, followed closely by Ontario. It was another rough day for the loonie, closing below 75 cents for the second day in a row, and it could keep falling. Here's Anita Bathe on what a weakening loonie could mean for businesses and consumers here at home.
This Canadian chain of pet stores sells products made in the U.S., pet food and accessories that are costing the company more by the day.
Anytime you're seeing the U.S. dollar going up, there's pressure being put on producers, manufacturers, distributors in some way.
They say they're paying 7% more for their stock, and customers could soon feel it too.
We aren't passing on costs every day to the consumer, but as we're getting to that threshold of $1.34, you're going to see some increases in prices probably coming.
All this comes amid relentless inflation and efforts to tame it. As the U.S. Federal Reserve aggressively hikes interest rates, investors are seeking safety in the U.S. dollar.
In times of uncertainty, in times of high volatility, the U.S. dollar is an attractive refuge. It's effectively a safe haven.
It's not just the strength of the U.S. dollar that could be pushing the loonie down. Oil prices have softened, and the outlook for the global economy has weakened.
Everyone's looking at Canada and saying a lot of the things that Canada are selling won't be as in demand in the next 3 or 6 months.
Some businesses may benefit, though. A lower loonie is good for exporters, but not for Canadians traveling and shopping in the U.S.
I think probably cross-border driving is going to be where it's going to get hit first, depending on how low our dollar goes.
They may pay more for products here at home, too. For anything that's imported, from food to pet supplies, the weak dollar will just add to the sticker shock that's already hit Canadians hard from overall inflation.
I've never seen the amount of price increases that have come through in the last 18 months.
A trend that could continue if the loonie has further to fall. Anita Bathe, CBC News, Toronto.
While the weakened loonie may stop some Canadians from traveling to the U.S., CBC News has confirmed the federal government is leaning towards dropping a number of COVID-19 travel rules, possibly as soon as next week. As Sophia Harris reports, that includes eliminating testing requirements and the ArriveCan app.
When I opened it up, I thought, oh my God, what is this?
American Kathy Pedlewski was overwhelmed when she first read this long list of instructions included in her COVID-19 home test kit. Pedlewski was randomly selected to take the PCR test when crossing into Canada last month for a day trip to Niagara-on-the-Lake, Ontario.
Rotate the swab.
Pedlewski had to do the test herself, while a health professional supervised by video conference on Pedlewski's smartphone. Then she had to courier the test to a specified address.
It ruined my day. And the final straw, the drop. Really? You know, go out of my way, I don't even know where I'm going, to find a FedEx?
Pedlewski says she won't return to Canada until the random test is dropped. Several tourism organizations also want it nixed.
It's a very stressful situation for the guests.
This tourism director in Northern Ontario says visitors to the area can face big challenges if they're selected for the take-home test because some regions have spotty cell service and no FedEx drop-off sites.
We're hearing from guests that they won't be back because it's been such a negative experience. Until the testing is gone, they're not coming back.
And Pedluski questions the purpose of the program as her negative test result arrived after she returned home.
I didn't see how this was protecting Canadian citizens.
Ottawa has earmarked up to $1 billion for arrival testing and says the program helps monitor COVID-19 transmission coming from abroad. But some medical experts say you can get the same results for much cheaper by testing wastewater.
You can look at wastewater coming in on different flights. You can measure it at airports. There's just lots of different ways that you can do this creatively.
We'll come back to that issue separately.
On Tuesday, Health Minister Jean-Yves Duclos declined to talk about ending random testing, but suggested an announcement is coming. Sophia Harris, CBC News, Toronto.
More than 24 medical specialists from across BC have sent an open letter to the province's health minister. They're requesting an urgent meeting to discuss the, quote, crumbling healthcare system.
This is a pervasive acknowledgement among specialists that there is a massive problem with patients getting in to see us, languishing on our waiting lists, lack of resources to provide them with the care that we know they need.
Those are just some of the examples highlighted by the specialists. CBC has requested an interview with Minister Adrian Dix about the letter. He has declined. The Ministry of Health writes that it is aware of the letter and that doctors have avenues to communicate with government, specifically through Doctors of BC. Well, some disappointing news for those of you who love Halloween. One of the most popular local attractions will be canceled for the third year in a row. As Yasmin Gandam reports, the park board has been forced to derail the Stanley Park Ghost Train because of safety concerns.
It's a different scary surprise than expected this Halloween season. The Stanley Park Ghost Train is off the rails yet again, but this time it's because the antique engines are more than 60 years old and the aging parts are hard to find. The park board says the train has not passed a recent safety inspection. And last winter, the train was also plagued with service issues. There's only one manufacturer producing most of what's needed to fix the train.
I think the best analogy is sort of picturing your sort of old classic car if it was sitting in your garage for 2 years without being driven and without being maintained because folks are off doing other really high priority pieces of work. You know, parts seize, parts rust, and it just doesn't function the way you would once you finally pull it out of the garage.
The last ghost train ran in 2019 and was attended by more than 40,000 people. The original railway in 1947 was a child-sized train, with the first railroad opening back in 1964 for adults, and has been a popular attraction ever since. Although the train behind me here at Stanley Park won't be running in time for a spooky surprise at Halloween, the focus is to get it up and running again in time for the holidays. Yasmin Gandam, CBC News, Vancouver.
Yeah, it's got to get up and running for December for
I know.
sure. Obviously, huge disappointment for Halloween, but December is like, man, that's popular.
I think we've got a couple of toddlers who probably won't be as disappointed as we will be, but are riding on the Christmas train. So yeah, we're rooting for that, Anita. Yeah. I've got a few things I want to start off with. Taking you up to Prince George, I know many of you in the city feeling a jolt around 3:07 p.m. this afternoon. Yes, that was an earthquake, a magnitude 3.4 earthquake, shallow in depth, just 5 kilometers, which is why it was so widely felt. It is rare to see earthquakes in this part of BC. It's so far away from our off-coast tectonic setting, but a trench runs through Prince George, so we do have some old faults that get reactivated, and many people in Prince George earlier today reminiscing about the 1986 rumbler that was more like a magnitude 5. So yes, that's what you felt. Not likely to see aftershocks, but always a good reminder that we live in a seismically active part of the world. The next sure bet is this cold front. It's bringing showers to Haida Gwaii overnight tonight, and that's what's going to push this high pressure ridge out, the one that's been bringing us such Beautiful skies and just in time for fall. We'll notice a temperature drop tomorrow with showers on tap for Friday. But look at that, Anita, 24 and through Abbotsford, 20s inland. It's hard to think about Christmas, let alone Halloween with this kind of weather, but it is coming.
I was going to say, we might have a sunny Halloween. Great.
Not out of the question.
Thanks, Joe.
You're welcome.
Well, with just 25 days to go until local elections across BC, there are worries social media and political culture these days are dissuading people from running for office. But our Justin McElroy, he always crunches the numbers, and he did this on this one. He's looking at more than 3,000 people running and is finding a slightly different story.
Politics is becoming more and more toxic, and it's scaring more and more people from running for office.
When I hear of elected representatives who are saying, I'm not doing this anymore because of this venom from anonymous people, it makes me very, very sad.
The venom is real, and to be fair, some people are not running because of that. But the situation's a lot more nuanced than that. Here is a chart. It shows the number of mayors across BC seeking another term each election since 2008. And after going down time after time, this year it's actually gone back up. So what is behind the fact that more mayors are running for re-election, despite the rhetoric of more people stepping away? The answer to this question is one that we keep hearing a lot when it comes to people changing plans.
Well, mostly because of COVID. I had a number of things I wanted to accomplish before I left. And then really in beginning of year two, everything ground to a halt.
All told, there are more local politicians in BC seeking re-election compared to 4 years ago. Now, politicians are ambitious, and not accomplishing everything that they've wanted to because of the pandemic means that more of them are sticking around. And there's another group with 100 more candidates this election than last. Women.
To have that many more women willing to put their name forward to represent women in their communities, in both larger and smaller communities, I think it's a real win.
This year, a record high 40% of candidates will be women, but it's not equally distributed, meaning that there's more work to be done.
I hope that we would be back here in 4 years to say how many women got elected and how many women ran for a second and third term, and that means that we're moving the needle.
It does seem like politics is a nastier place these days, but plenty of people continue to step up in hopes of making their towns better and making city halls more reflective of their communities. But the more things change, the more they do stay the same. After all, of those 3,209 candidates, what are the most common first and last names? Well, there are 51 Johns and 22 Smiths.
Well, is hanging clothes on your balcony banned at your place? It's not so rare for stratas to stop you from doing it, but after the break, we're looking at the pushback. Thanks for watching our commercial-free live stream tonight. Last spring, beekeepers across Canada lost about half of their honeybees because of a parasitic mite. After suffering such large losses to their colonies, some farmers are now preparing their hives for winter in hopes of a better harvest next year.
Danny Parody is a busy bee this fall. The 7th-generation beekeeper is monitoring his hives for mites. Parody says the mite called the Varroa destructor contributed to 65% of his hives being lost last winter.
But I do know because of the years that this is the time of the year where they populate very rapidly in the colonies.
Research into mites and associated viruses happened here at Northwestern Polytechnic's National Bee Diagnostic Center. Lab manager Patricia Wolfvega has worked at the lab since it opened a decade ago. She says there are treatments available, but evidence of resistance is emerging.
We have a lot of products we can use, but sometimes they are not as effective.
While research into better treatment continues, Wolfvega says breeding bees more resistant to mites is another option.
They have a strategy to cope or to control the mite infestation, so we call it the hygienic behavior.
Meanwhile, beekeepers like Parody are waiting for their hives to rebuild. He was able to fill his colony boxes by splitting hives and adding a new queen. But with fewer bees to do the work, there's a smaller honey crop.
So I would say it's kind of like a drought because all the expenses are there, everything is there except for the product.
Leaving little optimism for the beekeeper with honey in his veins.
We raised our family with it, but it's also in the point where something has to change because it's not, it's very hard to see light at the end of the tunnel.
Parody says all he can do is hope that if another loss happens, he will be able to rebuild. Luke Ettinger, CBC News, Grand Prairie.
It's an old way of drying clothes, but there's a new movement to increase the use of clotheslines. In BC, strict bylaws keep many residents from setting up clotheslines or putting out a drying rack. But last week, the Union of BC Municipalities passed a resolution that would ask the province to consider enacting the proposed Clothesline Act. It would override bylaws against clotheslines, which are strongly enforced in strata complexes for aesthetic reasons. Supporters say the resolution would help cities meet climate goals. For some more perspective on this, I'm joined by Tanushree Pillai, a clothesline proponent and an anti-racism educator. Okay, first off, we had a big debate today in the newsroom. Is it clothes or clothes? Do you pronounce the TH?
Well, I'm Indian, so I feel like my pronunciation is always questioned. It's clothes.
Clothes, yeah, okay, that's what I say too. I pronounce the TH, but we had a few people who were going straight to the clothes, no TH. Okay, on to the serious stuff, the clothesline. Tanushree, you're a proponent for air drying, but tell us why you had to stop doing that.
Yeah, so in the summertime, I have kids and they take swimming lessons like a lot of kids. And I have stuff like this that I need to dry. And I'm in a strata complex and I don't have access to a dryer or a washer. I do have one in the basement, but I'm not going to run that for like one piece of underwear. And so I have frequently put out laundry to dry. And, I'm also Indian, like clothesline is something that comes very naturally to me or to us, actually, I should say. So I put them out to dry on the patio, as I do a lot. And lo and behold, a few days later, my strata sends me this letter. And it says that I am breaking some blah, blah bylaw and that I have to present myself in person to council to explain why I was doing that, or that they'd send me like a fine, levy, something. So I just emailed them, saying, hey, I'm sorry, I wasn't aware. And then I just removed the clothes rack. But that just sort of set me off this very, sort of rabbit hole, so to speak. And I was wondering, like, is this a North American thing? Like, I come from a country where we just dry our clothes on the patio, like we don't think about it. And so one thing led to another, and here I am.
Yeah, and you mentioned that you're Indian. Metro Vancouver is a hub for immigrant families, many of whom are used to drying outside as well. So how is this impacting not only yourself, but those newcomers that are forced to use a dryer?
Yeah, like moving to a new country, a new continent is just such a big shock in itself. A lot of the times you tend to forget like the small little things. Like in this case, drying your laundry. And even for folks, who like watch TV or whatever, there's this, people don't expect being sent notices by the strata council because they're doing what they should be doing. One, because it's free. Like, that's the biggest aspect. It's free. It's not costing you anything if you put it out to dry on your patio or in the sun or wherever. And then the other thing is, it's just completely at odds with our climate goals. And so as newcomers, when you come here, you're just so always questioning everything that you're doing. You're always so conscious. You're always wondering, are you fitting in? That the aspect of assimilation is so strong. And then anything that you do that sort of sets you as the other always sends these red flags. And so in terms of financial aspects, I don't think people are prepared for how much money it takes to dry clothes. Nobody ever tells you that.
Yeah, and just quickly here before we let you go, there's also the environmental aspect of all of this. What do you have to say about that?
I think it's frankly very hypocritical that on the one hand, we're, my municipality says we're in a climate crisis. The province says we're in a climate emergency. We have fires and floods and all of these going on. And here's this very, very low-hanging fruit that we can pluck like right away. But we're not willing to do that because we're prudish. We're just so concerned about aesthetics. We're just wanting to police how people dry their underwear. It's just mind-boggling, to be honest.
Tanushree Pillai is a proponent for the clothesline and an anti-racism educator. Thanks for being with us today.
Thank you so much, Anita.
A blunt message from a Russian president on the defensive. Vladimir Putin warns of nuclear attack, promising it's not a bluff. The world's response next.
Here at home, squatters have been removed from a Vancouver landmark building. Early this morning, police arrived and ended a week-long protest over the lack of social housing in Vancouver. As Alan Waterman reports, the squatters say they're going to continue to protest for more affordable housing.
5:30 in the morning, and Vancouver police are ready to arrest everyone inside this building. Dozens of squatters have lived on this site for the past week, determined to create housing for the homeless. Police have had the legal right to remove them since Tuesday, but they waited until today. 60 people were arrested. Most put up no resistance, although pepper spray was used on one.
We had attempted for 4 days to find a peaceful resolution and have the occupants come out on their own accord. That's what we had anticipated and that's what we had hoped for. We gave them that final option yesterday afternoon and they insisted that they were not going to come out on their own and that police were going to have to remove them physically.
This is what the protest was all about. The former Woodward's department store. When it closed in 1993, many activists and even a few politicians hoped to turn the heritage building into some form of social housing. But 9 years and several failed plans later, the site was still empty, and the provincial government has put the building up for sale.
Fight, fight, fight! Housing is a right! There'll be hell to pay!
That prompted a coalition of local activists to begin an occupation in a hope to force the province to reconsider. Its response? A court order to clear the building.
You should be supporting the people! Now you're supporting the government!
It's depressing that, the basic human needs for anyone, anywhere is being violated. And, it's a simple solution. Just give us this home and then we'll be back to law-abiding citizens once again.
Those left outside the building vow they will keep up their fight for the homeless despite the arrests. And despite the government's assurances that it's spending more on social housing than ever before. Alan Waterman, CBC News, Vancouver.
Hot on the heels of an effective Ukrainian counter-offensive, Russian President Vladimir Putin has announced Moscow's first troop mobilization since the Second World War. The partial mobilization will see upwards of 300,000 reservists tapped to fight in Ukraine. As the CBC's Briar Stewart tells us, the move comes with a chilling warning for the West.
In cities across Russia, some took to the streets trying to denounce a war and a plan to force hundreds of thousands to fight in it. The arrests came quickly. This morning, people in Russia learned the government will call up 300,000 reservists, mostly young men who went through basic training. But some already knew a draft was underway.
I'm not happy with this. I want we and other countries to live in peace.
We're only identifying this student by his first name, Georgi. But the 23-year-old received a draft notice on Monday. He hopes to be exempted, but knows there are no guarantees. He and his family watched Putin's address in disbelief.
I was shocked. My mother was crying.
Russia's move to call up reservists is a sign of how much its military is struggling. Last week, it was pushed back from a large area near Kharkiv. Today, the Defense Ministry said that nearly 6,000 soldiers have died so far, a significant underestimate, say Western officials. And it was the West that Putin took aim at during his pre-recorded address. We will, without question, use all the means at our disposal to protect Russia and our people, he said. This is not a bluff. He said the 4 Ukrainian regions that plan to hold referendums have Russia's full support. After all, they're all currently occupied by Russian troops. By voting to join Russia, analysts say it sets the stage for further escalation.
He will exactly to organize the referendum, to state that those regions are integral part of Russia. And if someone will attack or conduct any kind of military operations, the use of nuclear weapons will again be raised.
On the streets of Moscow, hours before the evening's protest, many were supportive of the government's plan and say the referendums are a long time coming. They want to live decently. That's why they're looking to be rescued by joining Russia, said one man. We need to protect them, and we need to be united in everything. But Russia's war next door now feels even closer to home, and it will get harder for some to keep carrying on as if life here hasn't changed. Briar Stewart, CBC News, London.
Okay, you just saw there Putin's announcement had some Russians taking to the streets in protest. Others, though, may be headed to the airport. Internet searches for flights out of the country surged, but the European Union has a flight embargo on Russia thanks to the invasion of Ukraine. Now, tickets for 2 European carriers still flying out of Moscow are either sold out or have soared to prices in excess of $10,000 Canadian. U.S. President Joe Biden, meanwhile, addressed the United Nations General Assembly today, speaking on a range of global issues while promoting America's leadership in world affairs. But as the CBC's Chris Reyes explains, the main focus of his address was Russia's war on Ukraine.
U.S. President Joe Biden urged world leaders to stand together against Russia in his address to the General Assembly.
This war is about extinguishing Ukraine's right to exist as a state. That should make your blood run cold.
In the broad, sweeping speech, Biden listed all of the world's challenges, from the climate crisis to food insecurity to threats to democracy. He touched on the conflicts in Iran and Ethiopia, the famine in the Horn of Africa. He once again called for a 2-state solution to Israel. He repeatedly blamed Russia for causing further destabilization in a world that's already dealing with once-in-a-generation problems. At the core of his message, Russia must be held accountable for its actions.
Because if nations can pursue their imperial ambitions without consequences, then we put at risk everything this very institution stands for, everything.
On the heels of a brand new message from Russian President Vladimir Putin threatening to use all means necessary to protect Russia's sovereignty, Biden accused Putin of making irresponsible nuclear threats.
A nuclear war cannot be won and must never be fought.
Biden said it's the responsibility of all member nations to protect and defend the UN Charter.
My fellow leaders, the challenges we face today are great indeed, but our capacity is greater. Our commitment must be greater still.
And finally, Biden called for reforms to the Security Council, saying that it needs to be more inclusive. He suggested expanding the number of seats, both permanent and non-permanent, and urged the permanent members of the Security Council to limit their use of veto powers. Chris Reyes, CBC News, New York.
The president of Iran also spoke at the UN today while protests raged in his country over the death of a young woman in police custody. The president told the assembly his country fights against injustice, even as security forces in Iran crack down on anti-government demonstrators. At least 3 people have been killed when security forces opened fire. The protests erupted after the death of 22-year-old Mahsa Amini. Her family says she was beaten by Iran's mortality police, who arrested her for violating the country's headscarf law. Meanwhile, in Vancouver, members of the Iranian-Canadian community protested today in front of the Iranian embassy. Many who attended are calling for more accountability from Iran's morality police, a law enforcement force that regularly detains people for failing to meet the state's rules on modesty. And tonight, Donald Trump faces yet another serious legal threat in a year already full of them. A sweeping civil lawsuit launched by his home state of New York accuses Trump and 3 of his children of fraud and corruption. And as Paul Hunter shows us, the suit's architect is not mincing words.
Portraying Donald Trump as a lying, thieving phony, the allegations against him today were blunt, forceful, and detailed.
I am announcing that today we are filing a lawsuit against Donald Trump for violating the law as part of his efforts to generate profits for himself, his family, and his company.
New York Attorney General Letitia James today after a 3-year investigation into alleged actions she calls staggering.
To unjustly enrich himself and to cheat the system, thereby cheating all of us.
On the values of multiple Trump properties from Mar-a-Lago to Trump Tower, even his own apartment, she says there's clear evidence he repeatedly misled banks and government departments, bringing reduced taxes and better bank rates.
The statements of financial condition were greatly exaggerated, grossly inflated, objectively false, and therefore fraudulent and illegal.
Trump's adult children are also named, so too others in his organization. Among other penalties, the civil suit seeks at least $250 million. And it's worth noting, despite Trump having so far survived myriad other investigations, mostly unscathed, civil suits come with a lower legal threshold for authorities to prove. Meanwhile, Trump's own former attorney general today pushed back on Letitia James.
It's hard for me not to conclude it's a political hit job. And this is a woman who campaigned for office promising she was going to go after Trump.
Still, for the former president, it's a major slap coming just weeks before the midterms and as he considers taking another run for the White House. Trump himself today called the lawsuit another witch hunt. Paul Hunter, CBC News, Washington.
It's still days away, but already people in eastern Canada are bracing for the worst. We look at the massive hurricane heading their way next. And at 6:43, a live look tonight at downtown Vancouver. The weather is still warm, even though it's fall, so how long will it last? Johanna has her full forecast next.
Welcome to the CBX. Wanna test me? Be my guest. Welcome to the CBX.
Hey everybody, it is Twisted Miyake Mugler, one of the founders of the Toronto Kikibram Alliance. I'm the father of the House of Miyake Mugler. So today we're going to break down an element of voguing, which is the duck walk element. I don't know, some of you think it's really hard, is because it is. There are so many ways to do the duck walk wrong and one way to do it right. So if you want to do it right, come with me. Let's go. So if this is your first time voguing or you're what we call a virgin in ballroom, let me introduce you to your girlfriend, the wall. All right, so now we gotta get into our duck walk position. This is why we have the wall in the first place. It keeps our balance so that we don't go like this. So get into your duck walk position. You wanna be shoulders back. You want the S in your chest, your breast to pop. And you wanna be really sitting on your foot, the heel of your foot. Now we gotta add our bounce. So you just wanna really bounce to the beat. Don't do too much, it's not aggressive. It's easy, relaxed, cute, in your spot. So now that you got the bounce, let's add the kick. So at every bounce, you gotta make sure you do a little kick. And the idea is that your foot is just doing a little tap, tap, tap. Remember, we're ducks, not soccer players, okay? Just like this, okay? Wham, 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 wham. Wop, wop, duck, walk. You're feeling it, aren't you? We don't care. You got your bounce, they got your kick, they got your posture. Now we gotta add some hands, all right? And you have 3 options for a basic duck walk, you know, giving you the hands part. So you have the flopping hands, with just like this on the side. So option 2, we have the hand on the shoulder, but you just take both hands, kind of like you're just throwing something behind you, tap the shoulder, same foot, same hands. And option 3, we're giving you the catwalk hands. So it's basically like you're doing a catwalk in the duck walk position. And that is number 3. I need a break. Legs. It's nighttime now, which means you should really have it, and it is time to put it into practice. And what better way to do so than at a ball? DJ, the beat. Did I do that? I swear I'm not a witch. Joining me for this special ball portion, we have 2 special guests from the Kiki House of Siriano, my Kiki House. I have my daughter, Vagina. Hey, daughter. Hey, daughter. And I have another special guest, the baby of the Canadian ballroom scene, Sizzle Siriano.
Hey, Father. Hey, sis.
Hey, Sizzle. Have you guys been practicing your duck walks?
A little bit.
Well, I hope so, because it's time to storm the runway. Let's go.
Communities across Atlantic Canada are battening down tonight as Hurricane Fiona, now a Category 4 storm, heads for our country's eastern coast. Kayla Hounsell shows us the damage done and what Canadians can expect.
Hurricane Fiona has already shown its devastating strength, lashing Puerto Rico, the Dominican Republic, and Turks and Caicos, killing at least 8 people, leaving more than 1 million in the dark.
Puerto Ricans, we've been tested by everything. Hurricane Maria made us tougher than we were.
Packing winds of 215 kilometers an hour, it is now taking aim at Bermuda, tracking toward Atlantic Canada close to Cape Breton Island by late Friday evening.
So I think everyone should take this storm seriously and make the necessary preparations.
As it arrives here in Atlantic Canada, Hurricane Fiona is expected to transition to a post-tropical storm. But that doesn't mean it won't still be powerful, producing high winds, storm surge, and heavy rainfall.
One of the other things that happens with these storms when they transition to a post-tropical storm at our latitudes is they actually get bigger in size. So the area where the weather and the impacts are increases.
On Prince Edward Island, Ken Hines agrees it's best to get ready.
Safe to get your boat out and put it away and not have to worry about it.
Atlantic Canadians pride themselves on taking storms as they come, but a warning.
I know a lot of people go around and think, we're no strangers to wind, but when we're talking about wind of this force and coming in, it is of great concern.
The Canadian Hurricane Center says the impacts of this storm could compare to that of Hurricane Juan in 2003,
and Dorian in 2019.
Some people will hear these warnings and think, I've heard all this before and it didn't amount to much. What is your message to those people?
Never take a storm like this lightly, and be ready for it.
The potential for damage may become more clear over the next couple of days, but meteorologists agree Canadians will feel Fiona's ferocity. Kayla Hounsell, CBC News, Halifax.
Meteorologist Johanna Wagstaffe is here now. And Joe, I know you're watching this hurricane closely. What's the latest?
Well, yeah, Anita, I want to show you what Fiona looks like on the satellite right now, maintaining that Category 4 status. This is the largest hurricane we've seen in this basin, with sustained winds over 215 kilometers per hour. And I've actually set the track back so you can see it moved through Puerto Rico and Eastern Dominican Republic this weekend before hitting Turks and Caicos. We're finally seeing conditions ease there. But look at that well-defined eye. This is a powerful and large storm. In fact, I know a hurricane hunter just getting ready to fly through the eye to give us the latest data, because some strengthening is possible over the next 48 hours. Looking to brush just west of Bermuda, again, as a strong storm. And then, as Kayla said, there will be Canadian impact. Friday into Saturday is when this storm will transition into that hybrid storm you heard the meteorologist from the Canadian Hurricane Center talk about. So still maintaining its hurricane force winds, but growing in size. We're looking at impacts that can range from coastal flooding, infrastructure damage, and there's a lot of foliage on the trees right now. So watching for those impacts as well. And we do have widespread cyclone statements in place. We'll keep you posted for those who have friends and family on the East Coast. Our approaching system, very different. A classic cold front coming our way, as I mentioned earlier, bringing showers sliding down the coast as they run into what's left of our high pressure system, really breaks apart. Here's a snapshot of Friday morning, and you can see that cold front almost disappears. It's much more unorganized as we head into Friday's forecast. Widespread showers still possible across the south coast, and I do think we'll see showers here in Metro Vancouver, but it's really just a blip. High pressure builds right back in for the end of the weekend into early next week. Now, the fall equinox does occur tomorrow, 6:03 p.m. local time, and we will feel a cool down. 21 in Victoria tomorrow, 24 for Kelowna. Few more clouds in the Kootenays for tomorrow afternoon, and Prince George 21 for you. Notice the showers in Prince Rupert, though, with highs to 12. That's a taste of what's coming for the rest of the province. So that cold front's actually bringing a good 5 to 6 degree temperature drop, and we'll really notice that on Friday. So here's the forecast for Metro Vancouver with temperatures for YVR 19 tomorrow. So a couple degrees cooler, almost in line with the fall equinox. That drop, though, really to come for Friday. It's going to be a chilly, breezy, and yes, showery day. The showers starting early, sort of pre-dawn for Metro Vancouver. Again, not widespread or not heavy, maybe 5 millimeters, and we'll hope for that. It has been an exceptionally dry September for much of southern BC. Keep seeing those temperatures rebound into early next week. And Anita, that's almost summer-like as we head into Monday and Tuesday, but fall is around the corner. In reality and in theory.
Well, I'll take that. 22 degrees. Love it.
It's not bad for end of September, yeah.
It's pretty good. Thanks, Joe.
You're welcome.
Well, a city near Edmonton is taking a deeper dive to see what's going into their bins. They've commissioned an audit to see how residents are doing when it comes to separating recycling and trash from compostables. Emily Fitzpatrick takes a closer look at a messy job.
No black bag should be in an organics bin. Stacey Shub-Sabo likes to call herself a professional dumpster diver, and she was hired by the city of St. Albert to do just that. Her job is to sort through the waste from 100 homes to see if people are using their green bins correctly.
We have about 40 categories right now, which means paper will be broken down into mixed paper and cardboard. Organics, for example, will be broken down into edible food, inedible food, compostable paper, other organic waste such as the coffee stir sticks, like wooden stir sticks or popsicle stir sticks.
Along the way, she finds plenty of common mistakes.
So we have often found where a person will have a takeout food bag and they're finished their lunch or meal and they'll just dump it into the compost bin. And what we'll find inside that takeout bag is those plastic dipping sauces. We'll sometimes find straws that are not compostable. We'll find even unopened ketchup packs. So those are materials that need to be put into the garbage stream.
This is Shub Sabo's second audit for St. Albert. The city will use her findings to help grade their compost program and determine where they should focus their efforts.
So the spring and the fall audit data will be compared to see if there's any trends in organics contamination and the type of material that is being composted. And then we crunch all those numbers, we present pie charts and figures of composition tables and items that were identified as contamination.
It's a stinky job, but she's happy to do it. Emily Fitzpatrick, CBC News, Edmonton.
When you think of the Vancouver Symphony, you probably aren't thinking of English rock band legends, The Police. But drummer Stuart Copeland is set to change that. We hear from him next.
I want to thank the team for coming back and supporting us through the COVID.
It was a rocky first season for the Newfoundland Rogue. First, their record 6 straight wins, but then came COVID. Owner Tony Kenny didn't want to give up on his hoop dream.
We wanted to push ahead. We wanted to put a good product. We wanted to finish what we started, and we're delighted that we're going to have this.
The name, owner, and head coach remain the same, but the American Basketball League is out and TBL is in.
TBL is a 6-year-old league that started as a concept that I got from my time in Canada. When I was the commissioner of the NBL Canada, I thought that, man, this is such a cool league in Canada. Why don't we have something like that in the U.S.?
His focus now is growing his league north, thanks to a partnership with the NBL Canada. St. John's is the first of many teams, he hopes.
We want to be in Halifax. We want to be in St. John. We want to be in PEI. We want to be in Moncton. We want the Maritimes back. Now, that may come back in the NBL form, not in TBL. So my role is I've taken on a partnership with the NBL Canada to help them expand.
The Rogue will join a yet-to-be-announced Quebec-based team in TBL, but they will play games in January against NBL Canada teams, similar to the ones that the St. John's Edge played against. Head coach Jerry Williams says he's talking to lots of talent, but this picture posted to the Rogue social media sites has gotten lots of people talking. Williams and retired NBA All-Star Ron Artest.
Oh, Ron is my guy, man. We've been talking to Ron since the season ended last year. He was very interested in, playing and trying to help us continue the season and things of that nature. So, I talked to him a lot. So we'll see. We'll see what happens. Maybe he'll be in St. John's.
Is there any chance that Ron Artest could play?
Maybe. I'm not going to say yes. I'm not going to say no, but maybe. We'll see.
In the meantime, he's busy trying to get a roster together for 2023.
I have to take my time and pick the guys that's going to be right for the city. So, I don't want to rush this thing. We have until January. Like I said, I've been working since we left here last year.
But here's the question, and it's the same old question. Can St. John support 2 professional basketball teams?
Every other country in the world has multiple leagues. You go to Germany, there's 5 or 6 leagues. So why can't 2 leagues, especially 2 that really don't overlap much in schedule, play at the same time?
The team will play 28 games at the Mary Brown Center starting in January. The hope? Fill up these seats with fans. Jeremy Eaton, CBC News, St. John's.
Hi, I'm Amy Bell, and here's what's in your CBC Vancouver inbox.
Celebrate the best in BC beer with Stephen Quinn at the annual BC Beer Awards and Festival on November 5th. Enjoy beer, food trucks, music, and more. Get tickets at bcbeerawards.com and join Dan Burrett at the Starlight Gala on October 14th. This inspirational evening will raise funds to support the Richmond Hospital and healthcare in the community. Learn more at richmondhospitalfoundation.com.
Stuart Copeland, drummer and founder of the rock group The Police, will play 2 concerts with the Vancouver Symphony Orchestra. His show is titled Police Deranged for Orchestra and will include some of the group's biggest hits like Roxanne and Message in a Bottle.
That's what we do, is make people feel stuff and move people and get them moving and dancing. And so that's why I'm taking my chops from my film composing world and applying them to an orchestra on police songs, because people know those songs. They grew up with those songs, whether they liked it or not.
Yes, we definitely know those songs. If you're interested in experiencing an 80s rock orchestral show, Copeland will be performing on September 30th and October 1st at the Orpheum. I would check that out for sure. I am very interested. Seems like it'd be a pretty incredible show, and at the Orpheum, always a great venue. Okay, speaking of shows, that is it for ours tonight. Thanks for being with us, and we will see you back here tomorrow.